Alrighty, good morning, Miss Hoffman's class. So, today's lesson is called Discovery and Danger on the Prairie. On July 19th, 1804, William Clark found himself at the edge of an ocean. It was not the Pacific Ocean, the vast sea to the west that Clark and his friend had hoped to reach. In fact, it was not an ocean of water at all. It was a large, flat area of land covered in grass called a prairie. A prairie goes on as far as the eye can see, just like an ocean. So it's not really an ocean he's at, right? He's just standing here and it goes on for so long that he's comparing it to an ocean because that's the only experience he's had with it so far, right? Okay, Clark was hunting for the expedition and spotted some elk tracks, which he followed up a hill. He later described what he found at the top. I came suddenly into an open, boundless prairie. I could not see the edges in any direction. This was so suddenly and entertaining that I forgot the elk I was following. Clark had reached the eastern edge of what today we call the Great Plains. Wild grass as high as Clark's knees stretched out and blew gently in the wind, interrupted every so often by a hill or a grove of trees. That sea of grass stretched out all the way to the distant Rocky Mountains, which it would take the Corps of Discovery weeks to reach. During those weeks, the explorers saw many animals and plants new to them. Meriwether Lewis was especially fascinated by the pronghorn antelopes, called pronghorns for short. He tried to get close enough to draw a picture of one of them, but the pronghorns always ran away. Pronghorns have incredibly sharp eyesight and a strong sense of smell to warn them of approaching danger. When Lewis finally came to a pronghorn and got a good look at the long curved horns that give the animal its name, he wrote, "The speed of this animal is equal, if not superior, to that of the finest racing horse. The pronghorn is my favorite animal we have encountered so far." The explorers were also astonished by the prairie dog, a tiny rodent. These little creatures, related to squirrels, lived together by the thousands in what men came to call prairie dog towns. The prairie dog towns consisted of underground tunnels that sometimes stretch out for miles across the flat plains. "We have to catch one to send one of these back to President Jefferson," William Clark declared. But catching a prairie dog was not so easy. One prairie dog standing guard above its hole in the ground saw the men coming and chirped a high-pitched warning. Instantly, all the creatures dived down into the ground. The men dug down after them, but found that the tunnels went down more than 6 feet below the surface, spreading out in all directions with emergency exits to escape their predators, hawks, coyotes, and snakes, all of whom considered prairie dogs to be delicious snacks. Clark wrote down their findings about the prairie dogs and pronghorn antelopes in his journal. Still following the Missouri River across the prairie, the expedition moved on. Soon, they began to meet new tribes of Native Americans. Most were friendly and welcoming, especially one tribe called the Yankton Secoy. A few of the Yankton Secoy guided the travelers for days, but then said, "You're coming to the land of the Teton Secoy. We will not be able to guide you any longer." Lewis and Clark had already heard about the Teton Secoy. President Jefferson wanted them to become friends with the Teton Secoy. However, the Teton Secoy were not interested in trade with the settlers and did not want to allow Lewis and Clark on their land. One September afternoon, John Coulter, one of the expedition's best hunters, was following the tracks of an animal. Coulter dismounted from his horse to look more closely. Some Teton Sequoia, hiding among the trees on their horses, shouted and rushed forward, riding off with Coulter's horse. Coulter walked back to the river and reported to Lewis and Clark what had happened. Minutes later, 5 Teton Sequoia appeared on the shore and calling out to talk to Lewis and Clark. Captain Clark answered, "We will not speak with you until our horses returned." Minutes later, more than 200 Teton warriors, all armed with bows and arrows, rode out from the trees and spread out along the riverbank. Captain Lewis remembered that President Jefferson wanted them to be friends with the Teton Sequoia. He quickly ordered, "Stop the boat and hold them steady here in the middle of the river." Clark smilingly called, "We come as friends from our great chief." The chief that Clark was talking about was President Jefferson. "We invite your chiefs to come and see our great boat." So they're trying to befriend the Teton Sequoia, right? Even though all these warriors are here and it might be scary, right? Clark ordered a few sailors to row to shore in a pirogue, and after greeting the 3 main chiefs, Clark brought 2 of them aboard the keel boat. There, he and Lewis were friendly to the Teton Sequoia and gave them gifts. Then Clark and the oarsmen took the chiefs back to the shore. That seems fairly friendly, right? Everybody's having a good time. Meanwhile, Captain Lewis stood ready on the keel boats, and his soldiers kept rifles on their hands or immediately by their sides in case of trouble. Everything seemed to be going well, until suddenly one of the chiefs shouted, "Your gifts are not good enough. You may not return to your big boat until you give us better gifts." Sequoia warriors grabbed the pyro's ropes and held it securely. How are they going to get out of this one? That's pretty scary, right? Clark knew that the Teton Sequoias honored courage. If he showed any signs of weakness at this moment, the Tetons might attack. Even if there was no fight, any chance of strong friendship with the Tetons could disappear. Clark whipped his sword out and, holding it high, firmly demanded, "Release our boat at once." Back on the keel boat, Lewis ordered his men, "Prepare arms. Only on my order may you fire, and not a second before." Instantly, the soldiers raised their rifles. In answer, the Tetons raised their bows and set their arrows. Ready to shoot, the Corps of Discovery. No one moved. The silence stretched on for a long, tense moment. Then a Sequoia chief told the warriors holding the rope, "Let go." They obeyed. Clark told his oarsmen, "Return to the keel boat." One of his men said quietly, "Without you, sir?" "I gave you an order," Clark said in a voice that sounded much calmer than he actually felt. So he's telling his soldiers to go back onto the keel boat without him, right? That leaves no way for him to get off land and get back to the boat. That takes a lot of courage, right? So he's taking a chance that the Teton Sequoias are going to honor his courage rather than kill him for not bringing good enough gifts, right? As the pyro pushed off from the riverbank, the Teton warriors surrounded Clark. Lewis could see only his friend's hat over the shoulders of the Sequoias. Lewis gave orders, and as the pyro reached the keelboat, a number of armed soldiers got into the pyros and started back for Clark. But then suddenly the Tetons moved away from Clark. What do you think happened? Do you think maybe he talked to them? Clark's bravery had impressed the Tetons. The Tetons thought that Clark was brave because he stood up to them. They smiled in friendship and invited the members of the expedition to the village. The explorers accepted the invitation, and the Corps of Discovery had survived a dangerous situation. What they did not know was that even greater dangers and even greater victories still lay ahead. Alrighty, everybody. Check in tomorrow for our next chapter.